we're in an
Right.
age where it's getting harder because we're relying on AI, we're relying on marketing automation. But the part that
Yeah.
gets me is we're still not crafting the message. We're saying, hey, AI can hit 1,000 people a day, so we're going to hope one of them sticks. I'm not sure why you would do that. Why would you not
Yeah.
craft an amazing message to go out and each one of those 1,000 reach outs
Mm-hmm.
to increase your chances of closing a customer?
Show.
Hi, Terry. Thanks for having me. This is quite an honor.
Thank you. So I want to start with what exactly is a fractional chief learning officer?
Sure. So, as you're probably aware, Terry, the fractional movement is pretty big in the United States and abroad right now.
Yeah.
But as a chief learning officer, I'm really kind of a unicorn. The chief learning officer is another fancy name for the head of training and development. So, my job is to go into a company. I develop onboarding programs for the trainers in conjunction with HR, and we get people up to speed and get a return on investment for a company quick. Because companies spend
Nice.
a lot of money just getting someone to walk in the door, 18 to 20,000 by some estimates. So to
Wow.
get the person up and productive quickly is one of their goals. So I help do that on a fractional basis, and then I also train the salespeople if they don't have a set training program.
Ah, great. And is this what you always thought you'd be doing, or how did you end up in this role and doing what you're doing today?
Here's the funny part. I've actually been doing this for quite a while. I just didn't realize I was fractional until about a year and a half ago. So here I've been doing
Oh,
this all
interesting.
along. I just
Yeah.
never realized I had a label. So yeah, so I just realized about a year and a half ago that this is what I've been doing for probably close to the past 10 years. But Terry, I also do consulting on the side, and there's subtle differences between the two, but I do both of those for individuals as well as for corporate clients.
Fantastic. And can you tell us about your adaptive conversational blueprint? Because I'm really curious to learn more about that.
Yeah, sure. So my degree is in psychology, and I have certifications in neurolinguistic programming.
Mhm.
And for the longest time, I've done training 6 countries, 10,000 people, and I'm always a little disappointed when a training program is delivered as a script or some set process.
Yeah.
So my frustration came to the point where it's like, I need to show people sales is not a process. It's just
Mm.
not. Sales is a flow. It's a give and take. It's got its back and forth, and you need to adapt. So the blueprint I created, Terry, was basically it allows a person to get on the phone as a salesperson or even talk to a spouse or parent or a friend. It allows you to get into a conversation and understand their learning and communication styles, understand the way they may make decisions or use their posture or feeling that
Yeah.
day. And it allows you to adapt your conversation as you go. So I teach about psychology, I teach about neurolinguistic programming, and then I teach people how to adapt that into a way to have a meaningful conversation. My tagline is I teach people how to create the perfect conversation.
Excellent. Yeah, I know I've been in the past, I was in those sales positions where they'd give you the script and be like, stick to the script and just read this. And it was awful.
It is awful. It doesn't
Yeah.
allow you to flex your mental muscle at all. It doesn't allow you
Hmm.
to go off track. And the hard part is, Terry, that scripts are typically geared towards what they consider a large segment of the population, that this will work on a lot of people. And my question has always been, why wouldn't you learn something that will work on anybody? Now, you may not
Right.
sell everybody, but why not use an approach that's going to appeal to every person you call versus turning sales into some sort of math game where I close one out of every 50 calls?
Right.
It can never make sense to me.
No, it doesn't make sense, really. Like, yeah, that doesn't make sense at all.
And Terry, think about it. We don't look at anything else in life like that. I don't think,
Right.
well, let me visit 50 grocery stores to find the perfect loaf of bread. and let me date 150 people before I choose who my soulmate may be. We don't look at
Right.
anything else in life like that. So in sales, you have the uncanny ability with all the information at hand on the internet and everywhere else to actually supremely increase your odds of associating with that person. And yet, instead, we look at a script in front of us and say, this is the way to go.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to wrap my mind around. And when companies have used my blueprint, we've, as much as 3x sales, we've increased customer service ratings by 1.5 stars, all by
Nice.
teaching people how to converse and get away from the script.
That's amazing. And I think it's also such an important skill that goes beyond sales because people aren't taught to have conversations. We're
Right.
not taught how to communicate, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So I imagine I could also see how this could impact a company even beyond their sales of how they could even just interact among their team.
Well, and that's dead on, Terry, because what I do is I will work with executives and CEOs on how to run a better town hall meeting, how to
Nice.
talk to any potential venture capitalists, how to sell a new product idea. So having this type of adaptive conversation doesn't just fall into the sales world. I mean, God, I use it with my wife.
Nice.
We'll have a conversation and I actively get involved and I try to adapt to her as we talk. And this has unlimited applications, but in sales and customer service, the whole thing surrounds customer satisfaction and sales and continued sales.
Absolutely. So prior to doing this, because you mentioned you've been really doing this for the last 10 years, what led you into this line of work? What were you doing before?
I was a sales rep for 4 different companies. I was number 1 in 3 out of the 4. I've got a grudge against the 4th one still for not getting to where I wanted to go. But in one of the companies I was in, they said, would you be interested in teaching other people how to do this? And I said, well, sure, but I'm not 100% sure what I'm teaching them. I mean, I can show them how I do it, but it doesn't mean they're going to be able to do it that way. So I started teaching best practices, and the company that wanted me to do this for training actually brought me into their sales training and development department. And through, I'd say it was probably a 16-year time period, I gradually honed how I wanted to do things and build things out. And honestly, Terry, I was young when this happened, so there was a lot I needed to understand about life, let alone communicating. And now we're in an age where it's getting harder because we're relying on AI, we're relying on marketing automation. But the part that gets me is we're still not crafting the message. We're saying, hey, AI can hit 1,000 people a day, so we're going to hope one of them sticks. I'm not sure why you would do that. Why would you not craft an amazing message to go out and each one of those 1,000 reach outs to increase your chances of closing a customer? And I haven't seen any companies that are investing in the message as much as they are in the automation or the AI.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you see that impacting sales and the sales professions when it comes to AI?
Well, I get concerned. My biggest concern is that we're going to swing the pendulum really all the way to AI. And we're going to say, hey, I'll do my sales messages, my conversations, and I won't ever have to talk to anybody ever again. So my hope is we don't go that far. At the same time, AI and marketing automation can be so magical and can be devastatingly effective. But we need to remember that we can't take out the human piece of it. AI can only go so far, but unless you can somehow load every conversation that was effective on the face of the planet into AI and say, just do that now, you're not going to have that fully human approach. So I think AI and marketing automation are phenomenal if you're using the right messaging in there and you're not letting the AI do all of your messaging for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing to me how quickly AI has become ingrained into so many of our processes in business.
Yeah.
And even just like I think back to a year ago, or just over a year ago, none of us were using it. Like it wasn't a thing yet.
Yeah, exactly.
And now it's in everything, like so quickly. And I don't think people have really started to understand yet where it fits and its limitations. It has limitations. That's not a human. It can't interact as a human.
Yeah, and I'll give you a great example. I was online probably 6 months ago, and I was buying a large ticket item. And the sales representative spent some time with me on chat. We went back and forth, and I eventually agreed to buy it because I needed it for my business. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, I noticed a distinct change of tone after I put my credit card in. So I thought, I know what happened. So I typed in the message. I said, "Where'd my sales rep go?" And they said, "Oh, so-and-so had something else important to attend to, and I'll take care of you here from now." Terry, I'll never buy from them again. If you're going to take my money and then throw me over to AI, if I'm that little of importance to you, I'm not interested in doing business with you ever again. So I think AI's got a lot of great functionality. We can do a lot of great things, but we're already frustrated that there's not enough human connection. So when you pull out that piece, I think you almost have to do it at your own peril.
Yeah, I agree. Now, I've heard you talk about the value of cadence over content in a conversation. And can you go into that a bit for us and tell us what does that mean and what's the difference between cadence and content?
Yeah, so that kind of requires a definition of the word cadence, or at least as I see it. In my opinion, cadence is the going back and forth in a conversation. So I talk, you talk, I talk, you talk. And this is something that isn't taught very well right now. Like in all the countries I've worked in, I always hear, you gotta learn how to listen better, you gotta learn how to talk better. But nobody ever breaks it down to a science or a process. So going back to cadence, my thought, Terry, and this is through working with 10,000 people, is until you get a comfort level or a trustful level with someone, until you build that rapport, what you have to say just doesn't have the impact. It just doesn't matter. Think about the sales rep that calls and goes, "Hey, Gary, good to talk to you. I want you to buy this." No rapport, nothing going on. But if they were to call you and they were to say, "Terry, I'm so glad you picked up the phone. I was dying to talk to you. I listened to your podcast, and I just wanted to hear about it for a little bit before we even got into the main messaging." You're going to think about things a lot differently. You're going to tell me about the podcast. I'm going to ask for it. We're going to develop a cadence or a back and forth. Once we establish that content matters. Make sense?
Yeah.
So it's cadence over content until you get that rapport. That's my running theory, and that's the foundation of my 2-10 rule that I just wrote about in a recent book that was published.
Nice. What's the 2-10 rule?
So the 2-10 rule kind of wraps police tape around the interaction. So think about it this way. It's been shown that for every 10 minutes that I talk or present, that generates about 2 minutes worth of questions in your head. If you think about it this way, you think about sitting at a meeting where somebody's droning on, and about 10 minutes in, you're like, "I have a question." And they say to you, "Can take questions. All Q&As are at the end." But that whole meeting, you're like, "God, I just need the answer." So I combined this with the need for cadence in a conversation. And I said, think about it this way. For every 2 minutes you talk to somebody, spur an interaction. And it's a lot like what you do as a podcaster. You spur an interaction, then you listen, then you converse, then you spur an interaction, and we go back and forth. After 10 minutes, you kind of wrap it up. "Terry, listen, we've been talking for 10 minutes straight, and God, I've been blathering just like there's your tomorrow. Any questions I can answer based on what we talked about so far?" So if for every 10 minutes, I make sure you're involved in the conversation, and every 10 minutes, I wipe all the questions off the slate and you start over again, think about the impact that has on people. And again, I've instituted this with companies, and it takes practice. I have some people that catch on right away and others that need a stopwatch for the first 10 or 20 times they do it. But the difference it makes in conversations internally and externally in a company, it's staggering. It really is.
Yeah. So what is like if when you're teaching that principle to people, um, how are they practicing it? How can we start to apply that into our own conversations?
So, Terry, I think one of the big things is listening. And everybody throws around listening like, oh yeah, I listen.
Hmm.
Most people talk without regard to listening. And most people
Right.
talk, or I should say, most people listen just in trying to think up what they're going to say next. So, as a race, we're not great at listening overall. So,
Yeah.
part of the things you can do to start to do this is institute the 2-10 rule. So, say, okay, at the 2-minute mark, I'm going to make sure I interject with Terry. I'm either going to ask her a question or I'm going to throw out a comment and I'm going to make sure she's involved. Well, here's what happens when you do that. If I see that little ticker going up and it's coming on 2 minutes, I got to think, oh my God, I got to be listening. I have to be focusing on what she's saying or else I'm going to mess this up big time. And part of that is us asking a question or even repeating back just a little piece of what that person may have said. And I do this with my wife all the time. So
Right.
if she's had a rough day at work, I want to focus on what she's saying. So I make a deliberate effort to repeat little pieces back on the things that she said to me so I can stay involved and stay focused. So that's just one of the things you can do is set that timer, make sure within 2 minutes you interject and repeat back or ask a question on something that they said. And once you do this so often, it just becomes a habit and you'll be amazed at how often you do it.
Amazing. I think that's such a great takeaway for everyone listening to this. That's fantastic. Oh, I've heard you also talk about two words that can have a big difference in conversation. And can you give us some examples of that?
Yeah, sure. Uh, there are some great social psychologists out there. I mean, some amazing ones. And these people go out and do the work of figuring out just what impacts people and what doesn't.
Yeah.
And their work is tremendous. So I'll give you a great example. A study was done in the copy room of a New York City public library. And the scientists asked interns, I want you to try and butt in line at the copier. And keep in mind, this was back when there were copiers, but I want you to butt in line with a copier and just start making copies. As you may guess, New Yorkers aren't fond of people butting in line.
Right.
So they then modified the experiment and they said, okay, I want you to ask if you can butt in line. Or I want you to give them a good reason why. So say, because I have my child in the car right now and it's parked, or because I need to get home, or because my wife or husband or whatever is waiting for me. And what they found was when they used the word because and gave a good reason, the compliance rate went up by 60%. So 6 out of every 10 people basically said, okay, you can go ahead and jump in front of me. On the
Interesting.
face of it, that's not real fascinating. It's just
Mhm.
humans being humans. But
Yeah.
here's where it gets cool. So they modified the experiment one more time, and they said, now I just want you to give a nonsense reason. So when you jump in line, I want you to say, I want you to jump in line to make copies because I need to make copies. Just a repetitive, nonsensical reason. And what they
Mhm.
found was the compliance rate was near identical.
Ah.
So what that boils down to is the word because is such a powerhouse. And when you think back on it, when we were kids,
Mhm.
it's like, Mom, why is the sky blue? Dad, why is water wet? Why don't fish drown when they're underwater? You come up
Right.
with all these questions, and there's always a because. There's a cause and effect relationship.
Mhm.
Well, that doesn't get lost on us as we're adults. We constantly search for that cause and effect. And that's what the because statement gives. So an advice I always give to my clients is don't introduce a service, don't introduce yourself without telling them why they should be listening or why they should be purchasing. So I'm so-and-so, you should buy my widget because. And introduce that because it's going to increase the compliance rate by somebody close to 60%.
Amazing.
Fascinating, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
Here's another great example for you. If
Yeah.
we take one word and switch it between noun and verb, it can make a significant difference on how you're viewed. So think about in terms of you being a podcaster.
Mhm.
I do podcasts versus I'm a podcaster. Has two different rings,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
I love dogs versus I'm a dog lover. Two totally different things. One establishes commitment and longevity. I am a dog lover. It's going to happen now, it happened before, and it's going to
Right.
happen forever. I love dogs is like, I just started, and it may or may not hold. But you think about, I love to paint versus I'm a painter. I love to run versus I'm a runner. So social psychologists did an experiment, and they went to a kindergarten classroom, and they started by asking the kids to help clean up, to which you may guess had a very low compliance rate.
Yeah.
However, when they said, how would you like to be the teacher's helper? It was amazing, the increase in compliance, because you gave the kids
Wow.
identity, you made them part of a group, and everybody was to be part of a group, right? So it increased compliance dramatically. So they did it with adults. It was voting season. One specific district was having problem getting people out to vote. They always said, get out and vote, today's voting day. So they switched it to be a civic person, be a good civilian, and be a voter. And they
Nice.
found that voting rates went up by 20%.
Wow.
So by switching something from a noun to a verb and vice versa, it can be something that has a dramatic impact. So just a couple of examples. And Terry, there's hundreds, and there's social psychology books written all over the place about these high impact words and sayings.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you have an example of how you would apply that switching the noun to a verb, how you would do that in a sales context?
Yeah. So let's say that I produce, let's go back to the old widgets.
Yeah.
So I produce widgets. That's much different than I'm a widget producer. I've heard salespeople already say on the phone, yeah, we're involved with the manufacturing. Wow. That is a drop dead statement. It just falls flat.
Yeah.
But we are manufacturers is a whole different ballgame.
Right.
So the strength of something can be significantly increased by just changing one word or two to show our commitment to that. If I knew somebody was involved in manufacturing, what does that mean? You do it like on the weekends? Do you do it as a hobby? But if you say you're a manufacturer, it sounds like you've always done it, you're doing it now, and you're doing it into the future.
Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Huge impact difference for the person on the other end of the phone.
Interesting. How about words that we should be not saying in a sales conversation? Are there any phrases or words we should avoid?
Yeah. So one of the words that the things we definitely want to avoid is, hi, how are you? That to me is the death knell of every sales conversation. When I go into a company and I hear them say, hey, Terry, how are you? It's like we immediately need to change that. Because if you think about it, Terry, we are so conditioned to respond to that. My wife and I were out shopping over the Christmas holiday, and I went by another gentleman in a store, and I looked at him and nodded, and I said, hey. And he turned back to me and goes, fine, thanks, how are you? The whole conversation took place in his head. He brought out the conditioned response and was on his way. So seeing that the first 8 seconds determines whether you're going to give me the next 2 minutes of your time, I need to make that 8 seconds count. So I want to make a splash, and we put it up a little bit earlier. Terry, I'm so glad you picked up. I was looking so forward to this because I was hearing podcasts all the time. So with the internet, there's no reason we can't research somebody, know a little bit about them, and have that splash of the first comment to make them want to listen. So our ability to research somebody and be ready for that first 8 seconds there's no reason you can't be ready for that. So companies that decide to smile and dial and just get as many calls in as they can and just hope one of them sticks, you're missing out on such a huge opportunity, and all it takes is a little bit of research.
And what are, when you start implementing these into companies and you're teaching this, what are some of the results that they get from it?
Well, a company I worked with about a year ago, we 3x their sales, and we increased customer service ratings by 1.5 stars. Now, granted, that's the high end, but there has never been a time where we haven't seen pretty dramatic increases. I think the lowest we've seen is somewhere around 20%. But part of it, Terry, keep in mind, is the buy-in of the management and the buy-in
Right.
of the reps. That is a huge part of it. It's not just the program itself, it's what type of commitment you have to making these changes. And I've had some companies that are like, just you do what you need to do and we will do what you tell us to do. And I've had others that are like, we'll listen to you and we'll try it for a week, but it doesn't do any results. We're just not going to follow through on it.
Right.
So, Terry, I actually put clients through an interview process before we even get started to try and judge their commitment level.
Nice.
Because if you're not going to follow through on it, then it's a waste of both our times. How's that for a tough love part of the show?
Yeah. Yeah. What is that interview process like? How are you determining who's a good fit to work with?
Yeah, so part of it is I take an hour and I give people an hour. And during that hour, I actually give them some free tidbits based on what they tell me and what I think will work. And a lot of it, Terry, is judging. What's their uptake? What's their response? How do they react?
Right.
And I think after 30 years, I've gotten a pretty good feel about how people react and what they're going to say and what they're going to do. But if somebody gets an hour interview with me, they always walk away with things they can do. And if nothing else, if I don't think I can help them, I'll introduce them to somebody I think can. But I'm definitely not a fit for everybody, and everybody's not a fit for me. Did you get all that?
The last bit. Just the last bit. I heard you say I'm not a fit for everybody, and
everybody's not a fit for me. It's going to be important for us to want to walk together. Correct. It's as important for me to know I can work with them as it is for them to know they can work with me.
absolutely. And you want clients who are going to get results, not ones who are going to waste your time, to put it bluntly.
Right. And Terry, just to expound on that further, I don't have contracts.
Oh,
So if somebody's not happy with the way we're going, we can mutually break. I am not here to lock somebody into something that they're not happy with. We'll pull
wow.
together, we'll get results, and if we don't, you can gladly walk away.
No contracts. That's interesting.
Nope. No, I have them do a minimum number of sessions to start because nothing ever happens from one session. And when those
Right.
minimum sessions are over, we then decide together whether we continue to go on the path.
Nice. I like that. Yeah, smart. That's really smart. Now, I have to ask you, for those who are watching on YouTube, I can see your background. And for the audience who's listening, just listening to the audio, they can't see it, but you have a whole collection of action figures behind you. And we talked about that a little bit before we started recording, and I would love for you to share with the audience why they're important to you.
Sure.
why
So
you have
I've
so
been
many.
collecting comic books for 45 years. I've got a little bit over 15,000 of them. And the importance to me is that the dialogue
Amazing.
between superheroes is always so concise and it's always so direct and back and forth. And I was always fascinated by that in the artistry. I can't draw to save my soul, so the artistry did it. But I think the biggest thing, Terry, is that in life, I think we all face those things where we need to be that superhero once in a while, where we need to push through against the odds. And
Yeah.
all the superheroes I have in my office are just kind of that reminder of who I need to be for me, my family, and to reach the goals that I want to reach. I can't help but think that comic books are some of the best storytellers, and maybe, the origin of our own modern mythology, if you will. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a fun habit. I have my favorites, and my kids always wind up getting me some sort of statue for a birthday or whatever. But yeah, it's neat. My whole office is filled with like signed comic books and custom artwork.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating.
It is. That's so cool. Do you have a favorite superhero?
Yeah, I'm an old school Superman guy. I like the
Nice.
whole red, white, and blue. You honor your promises. You do things because they're right. Yeah, so I like Captain America too, two different comic book companies, but anybody
Yeah,
who just does things because it's the right thing to do, regardless of the consequences, I think that's to be admired.
absolutely. Yeah. Now I have some rapid fire questions for
Sure.
you if you're
Yeah,
game
I'm
for
up
that.
for it. Shoot.
Nice. Okay, what's your favorite book?
My favorite book is The Lucifer Principle. And I know that's going to sound terrible, but The Lucifer Principle is about the the need for conflict in order for things to get better. It talks a lot about how you can have war and conflict,
Nice.
but the end results are oftentimes needed. Now, please don't think I'm a warmonger because of this. I'm just always fascinated
No.
between the good and evil, prospect and how good can come of bad. And that book really spells it out. And
Yeah.
that book was like mid 80s. I don't even know if it's on the shelf anymore.
Cool. Yeah, great. What's your favorite food?
My favorite food is pizza.
Oh,
I make a
yes.
wicked homemade pizza. I like to make my dough from scratch, and boy, there's nothing like
Wow.
a good pizza.
Nice. Sounds
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah. What's your biggest pet peeve?
My biggest pet peeve is, wow, I think my biggest pet peeve is other drivers. I work from home, so when I do get on the road, I get hurt easily by other drivers. I'm starting to sound terrible talking about all
Yeah,
these things.
fair.
I could be single-handedly destroying my own interview by some of these answers.
Oh no, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. Um, who inspires you?
Uh, I have to say that somebody that inspires me is no longer around anymore. I was big for the corporate giant Lee Iacocca. I don't know if you remember him. He was the
Yep.
chairman of, yeah, he wrote a book years ago called Where Have All the Real Men Gone? And it's not about men in particular, it's just about values. It's is where has our strength gone to do the right thing and to do it because he believed in it. And if you remember Lee, he wound up doing a chairman's job for $1 a year because he wanted to do it. And granted, he could afford it, but still, that's pretty admirable to me. And I knew some of Lee's
Yeah,
relatives, and I've always held him pretty high in self-esteem.
great. Three things you would take with you to a deserted island.
Wow. Um,
Yeah.
boy, that's tough. I think I would take my baseball cap because my hair is making an exodus this early in life. Um, I would take a hammock because I definitely would need to
Nice.
just be able to have a place to lay. And I think I'd take my wife. Is that an option?
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. Then
Sure.
I would take my wife because, yeah, I just love her to pieces and wouldn't want to be without her.
Great answer. Okay. A celebrity you'd like to have dinner with, dead or alive?
Ooh, dead or alive?
Mm-hmm.
I think I would want to have dinner with Elon Musk. I would love to just pick his brain onto his genius, but I think the bigger thing I'd want to pick
Yeah.
his brain on is how do you deal with the constant pressure and at
Yeah.
times horrifying press and having yourself put out there all the time. And despite all that, he's still a magnificent success. But I almost
Mm-hmm.
want to crawl into the mind of someone who can cope so well and find out exactly how he does it.
Yeah, it'd be fascinating.
It would be.
Yeah. Yeah. And final one, what is your go-to karaoke song?
My go-to karaoke song is Lovely Day by Bill Withers.
Oh, I don't think I know it.
Oh, you'd know
I'm
it
gonna
if you
check
heard
it out.
it.
Oh, okay.
Classic song, just a great song. Yeah, look for it on whatever music platform you stream on after we're off the. But
I
anybody
will.
who's listening to this podcast will know Lovely Day when they hear it.
Nice. Oh, I'm definitely going to check it out right
Yeah.
after. Yeah. And so for people who are listening and they want to know more about how to work with you and connect with you, what would their next steps be?
You can reach me in two spots. You can reach me on LinkedIn. On there is Jake Stahl on LinkedIn. And you can also reach me at
Nice.
my website, jakestahlconsulting.com.
Perfect. Those will be in the show notes as well. And any final words before we close up?
I think the big thing I want to say to people is communication is something we do all the time. And few of us really try and improve at it. You know,
Mm,
we'd sooner watch a cat video or something like that than we would just trying to get a way to better communicate with the person next to us or across the street. Um,
yeah.
I'm often asked by people, you teach us all the time, are you any good at it? My answer is no. I make problems all the time, but I like to learn from them. And at the end of the day, you kind of forgive yourself and say, tomorrow's another day. But I would just encourage people, we need to communicate better. So brush up.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I really
You're
appreciate
welcome.
this.
Thanks for having me, Terry. This was an honor. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.